Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Sawcruhteez Streamz, and I am your host, Sawcruhteez. Today we will be looking at the weekly close in crypto. We'll be definitely looking at Bitcoin and then probably taking a look at Ethereum as well. So thank everybody for tuning in on this Sunday evening or maybe Sunday morning, Monday morning, depending on where you are in the world. Today was the first Sunday of football season, and that is something that I get excited for different reasons than most people. During football season, my favorite bar will start doing brunch, and they only do it during football season, and it's the best brunch around by a long shot. So when football season comes around, I get excited for brunch, but still not very interested in football just yet. This is baseball season as far as I'm concerned. We are coming down to, October is right around the corner. So during these months in the fall, I am most interested in watching baseball as well as golf. So not really caring too much about football other than I got to go down and have my favorite brunch, and oh my gosh, it pretty much knocked me out. I ate way too much and have been pretty sluggish the rest of the afternoon, but what are you going to do? So definitely enjoyed yesterday watching the UFC fights. Not sure if anybody else out there was watching. Old Khabib Nurmagomedov is just absolutely incredible. I mean, what a world beater he is. I am just absolutely love watching him fight. So with that being said, we might as well go ahead and dive on into the charts. Say hello to everybody in the chat. Old Dolphins says, got my hoodie on and ready, so way to go for that. I am definitely glad that there's somebody else out there rocking a hoodie. All right, let's go ahead and get into screen share. Okay. So we'll see. I was looking at some lower time frames, kind of seeing what's going on here, but let's go ahead and zoom out. I guess first thing is first, we did get the crossover with the 50 and 200 EMAs. But they are struggling to diverge. I mean, this is a very shaky crossover. You want to see the EMA, the 50, kind of, convincingly come through and continue trending up. This is highly indicative of a ranging market. You use the angle of the moving averages to determine the trend as well as the moving average crossover. If the short term is above the long term, that suggests a bull market, and if the short term is below the long term, that suggests a bear market. But if both moving averages are flat, that tells us that we're just in a range. So we're really not in a bull or a bear market. We're just trapped in this sideways action, which we can definitely see has been occurring specifically since this action right in here on September 6th. So for like the last 3 days, we've just been really trapped here between 10,300 and 10,570, we'll call it. So seeing that these moving averages are flat and the 50 specifically is having trouble maintaining the upward posture that it had back in here, really signaled the exit for sure. I was already out at a worse price, unfortunately, but the exit is signal, but it's certainly not pointing towards anything bullish or bearish. This is just suggesting a ranging market. So we will have to kind of wait and see what happens if we're able to break above or below these lines here. That I am expecting to happen. It would make sense that it happens here relatively soon, having the weekly close come up. That's generally when we get some action. So definitely we'll be watching for this range to break. Let me go ahead and clean this guy up just a little bit. Alrighty. So I am definitely, neutral right now. I am out of the market and waiting for further confirmation, and I have two very important areas that I will be watching. First is going to be 10,300 because of what we're seeing here, as well as a potential Wyckoff distribution pattern that I recognized basically right after finishing up with Tone's show this morning. We did have a good show, so I would recommend checking that out if you guys are so inclined. So let's see here. Just pulling up this chart right here. So we notice that there is a, well, yeah, we'll just go over to this first. We see the schematic number 2 is lining up pretty darn nicely, and I should have probably gotten both of these up back to back, but we'll just have to remember this as we go over to the other one, the preliminary supply, buying climax, automatic reaction, secondary test, signal of weakness in phase B, up thrust in phase B, LPSY, LPSY, LPSY. So what I'm looking at right now is that the support lines on the Wyckoff distribution pattern are coming in right here. This bottom one is at 10,300. That's why that is a very important area for me to keep an eye on. Is if we break down 10,300, that would definitely confirm this pattern. It's already lining up pretty darn nicely. Preliminary supply, buying climax, automatic reaction, secondary test, up thrust in phase B, signal of weakness in phase B, LPSY, which I also look at as a signal of weakness. If we make a lower high, we kind of turn this area here into resistance. That's definitely what you want to see in this pattern, and that is the first potential entry, is that LPSY right there. Second potential entry would come on a $10,300 breakdown. I didn't take that entry, and this is something I just kind of recognized this morning. And if we do have this breakdown like this, that's probably an entry I'll be taking. Maybe I'll be looking at Ethereum instead of Bitcoin, per what I was talking about in the last episode. But if this were to happen, then it would almost certainly be in line with the moving averages crossing back bearish. So right here we can see where the dotted lines start. That's where the predictions start, and the solid line is where the price is at right now. So just kind of looking back one more time at this pattern here, and just really seeing a whole lot of similarities, and we'll be watching close for 10,300 to break down, which would would confirm that pattern, and I would think, if we're back down in here, that's definitely going to cause these moving averages to cross at some point, hopefully before the price got too far away. Other boundary I'm looking at in terms of where I would be turning bullish to buy back is all based on this trend line right here. As long as we're below this trend line, I'm not interested in longing at all, and that's why I'm basically neutral. This bullish cross, it has not been really diverging. The moving averages are flat, so that tells me that it's probably a pretty good idea to be neutral and out. And these lower highs are basically one of the most important things to me right now, as well as this descending triangle. So basically, Tone and I talked about this morning, and he kind of wants to see it work its way down and through, and really I'm wanting this thing to make a move right about now. I look for about a 60 to 70% completion of the triangle. From here to here, would be like 100%. So right in here is definitely where I would be looking for this thing to break down. I was saying the same thing back here because I wasn't viewing it as a descending triangle. I was viewing it at that time as a symmetrical triangle, like so. And this only having the 2 touch points really didn't make me inclined to view it as a descending triangle. Now that we've got this 3rd touch point with the 3 clear lower highs, definitely meets the bill pretty clearly for a descending triangle. Tone picked this out, like I said, before me. I was viewing it as symmetrical at first. After this, I did start to see it as a descending triangle, and then I did see later on that Peter Brandt posted something calling it a descending triangle. So that's definitely, I always like, when somebody who, when it comes to patterns, I respect Peter Brandt much more than myself. If he says something, it carries more weight than my own personal analysis. I wouldn't say that about very many people, about very many indicators, but definitely Peter Brandt is probably he's the best pattern trader that I know. So when he's calling it something, I am very, very inclined to pay attention, and I really like it when he is calling it, when I'm already looking at it that way myself. Also seeing a broadening topping pattern. So it's like, for me, like I said, I am neutral. I got to be neutral. But if I'm really going to predict what I think is going to happen, which again is essentially irrelevant if I'm not putting my money where my mouth, if I'm not getting a signal to enter or exit, then what I think is just, almost irrelevant, because no matter how much I think something, I'm still going to wait for a signal to come through. But I'm just seeing bearish patterns inside of bearish patterns inside of bearish patterns. With the descending triangle is the most important market structure, and then we have the Wyckoff distribution that is coming in, and also looking at a broadening topping pattern, which found support right here on this sell-off. I didn't recognize that in real time. I'm just looking at this recently. But we can see that these are both look to be pretty darn important boundary lines. This topped out right there, found support right here, and now this is where the signal of weakness is coming in, where we turn this into resistance. So one bearish pattern is very, very significant to me. Seeing 3 of them, it's like, really making me feel like it's going to go a certain way, more so than if there was just one, one of these patterns specifically. If it was just one kind of small pattern like we're seeing here, having the small pattern inside the bigger pattern is definitely something that gives me a little bit more confidence about the potential direction that this will head. I didn't think we were going to get the golden cross, because we did get this, no, it was this one. Right as that cross was coming in, we got this big, big reaction to the downside, which is exactly what will happen sometimes. You'll just be within a whisker of getting a golden cross, and then boom. So when that happened, it really made me think that we would not get this golden cross. I thought, especially with this close here down below, I was thinking that was enough to believe that the attempt at the golden cross had came and gone. I was wrong. We did go ahead and rally from there. And something I did mention was just I always like to keep an eye on a 50% retracement of an extended range candle. So an extended range candle would be anything that is basically greater than average, and this would definitely meet that bill. If the average range of a candle maybe is something like this, or maybe something like this, anything bigger than that, especially when you get a good strong close near the low or the high where there's not like a really big wick reaction coming back. That's something that I pay very close attention to. So in the last episode, I did say that, I'm expecting this to continue breaking down, but if I'm wrong, the point where I would be wrong is at this 50% retracement level. So shout out to Fibbo Swanee. Saw him in the chat a little earlier. We did have a really great discussion today about Fibonacci's. He's definitely an expert in those, and I am not. I just basically learned the basics and was definitely refined my knowledge and learned quite a bit from our conversation. So that was really, really great. And I definitely appreciate him taking the time to teach me some of the tools that he uses so well. And just notice how, sure enough, that 50% really did seem to be like a very important barrier. We rallied, and that's basically right where we topped out. We tried to break through it, like this barely got above, this really resisted, this wicked above, closed right below, wicked above, closed right below, and then retraces dang near 100%. Let's see here if I can just make this a little bit more precise. Okay. Yeah, barely didn't get back to that 100% level and just shot right through 0.618 and 0.786 was where it has now kind of found support and is so that's kind of right in line with the horizontals that I was originally looking at. Would be now these two seem to be like pretty important levels. If it can get back above 0.618, then I would sure think it's going to go ahead and break through 0.5, but certainly never know. We could just be trapped in this range for a little bit longer, and that is, kind of what you see out of this Wyckoff right in here, is you do get kind of stuck in a range, but pay very close attention. These Wyckoffs, they look like they can be, fairly subjective, but there's some very, very important things to look for. Like in here, if you get the lower low and a lower high, that gives you quite a bit of, you really like to see that. And that kind of gives you some confidence that this will, those are signals of weakness, essentially. So that's definitely something that we could be stuck right in here for a little bit. We would like to see. It would have been perfect if this got a lower low and now this comes and makes a lower high. That would have been absolutely ideal. And we are splitting hairs, but it is important to do that with Wyckoffs because the signal of weaknesses or the signals of strength can really help you identify, distinguish between distribution or a potential reaccumulation. So it is important to pay very, very close attention, and that is maybe where it's good to check other exchanges. I always do trust BitMEX the most because it has the most volume, but we do see on Bitstamp a higher low as well. So we'll check one more, but that does, is important that this came in as a higher low instead of a lower low. So, okay, let's go ahead and zoom out a little bit. And gosh dang it. I thought that I turned the autosave off, which I thought would mean that it doesn't auto-save my stinking lines, but I guess I still got more to learn about all that, so be it. Okay, so now we are going to take a look at the weekly chart, and it's just starting to rain right now. I love hearing the rain. I hope it doesn't cause for any issues with electricity or anything like that. Okay, so looking at the weekly, I might be inclined to move that up a little bit. It would look weird on the lower time frames, but I definitely like the weekly candles to determine the major barriers and boundaries. So definitely would be inclined to move that up a little bit. So let's just take a look at nothing other than the weekly close. Oh. And we still have 20 minutes, so a little bit ahead of myself here, but that's okay. So this does, I mean, if anything, if I'm just looking at candles, just looking at this weekly candles, it's painting, a relatively bullish picture to me, being that we have this pivot here with this low between two. You would like to see this above this low, but that's not what happened. So instead, we've got this low between a higher low and a higher low that very much is something that the price could rally off of. Notice how we kind of get the similar action back in here. I guess this would be more of a tweezer bottom with a double bottom with those wicks. That's a tweezer, so that's not quite that pivot, but it's sure awfully darn close. Let's see if we can find some other action like that. It's actually kind of surprising that that's not too easy to find. Back in here we do have a nice one like that. I definitely thought we would see more. Here we go. That's a nice one. Here's one. And then you can look at on the other end of the spectrum, the high between two lower highs. So it's definitely that's something I've talked about quite a bit, and it is something that is important to me, especially taking out this high. That is important as well. And then we also barely took out the 2-week high just for a minute in a very trappy fashion. So we are back below the 2-week high, and it looks like we will not be closing above this high here. So definitely something to pay attention to. We've got a couple nice bearish ones up in here. Tough to say, just solely analyzing candles. It's, pretty neutral. If anything, I would say it has a bullish tilt to it, we'll say. So thinking of what else we would want to take a look at on the weekly chart, and definitely want to look at the ADX. So I've already got it pulled up. Now that we have the RSI there, we might as well go ahead and analyze it. Interesting. And this is something that I've never, the hidden divergences are something I've never really quite understood. And I don't think they're that complicated. I should probably just take the time to clarify it. But we see that we do have a regular bear div, but barely, in terms of that is a higher high, and that is barely a lower high. What's interesting is that it's already made a lower low in relation to this. I think that might be a hidden divergence. I don't know. And then it's also made another lower low. So that's pretty interesting. From here we see higher low here, and definitely a higher low here. And here we've got lower low, lower low. So that's interesting. On one hand, it could be, we could say that that's bullish if it comes back and kind of resets down around the 50 territory as price goes sideways, now we're not overbought on this thing anymore, so that would potentially indicate that it's cooled off and could be ready for another leg up. But it also could be painting a different picture with the lower lows already happening. That's definitely something to give some thought, maybe look into a little more. I should probably understand that better, but I don't, so what are you going to do? Go ahead and add the ADX with, no, ADX and so we do see the DIs coming together, showing that demand is waning, supply is increasing. We do see that it's that has turned back down, so that is something to definitely pay attention to. If this was racing up, that'd be painting a much different picture. But we are diverging, and we are now on the other side of the momentum appears to have topped, and right in here, when we failed to create another higher high and we got this kind of lower high, the ADX rolled right over. So that is not a whole lot to say, because what I'm going to want to do is look at lower time frames, because really, in my opinion, in the time frames that I trade and the way that I'm looking at this market, is that this market is ranging right now. So I would want to look for some lower time frames to see is the ADX agreeing with it being below 20, and is it maybe on the verge of crossing 20 to suggest that maybe we're ready to break out of a range. So we'll come back to the weekly in a second. So this is kind of what I'm talking about here. This is very much indicating a flat market that maybe isn't quite ready to make a move. We would want to see this crossing 20, and we would really want to see the DIs diverging to say that, okay, this thing is really ready to go ahead and make a move. And potentially I should have been paying closer attention to that down in here, because here I was expecting the market to break down, and it didn't, and the ADX could have helped me realize that, because if the ADX is below 20, then that says that we should probably expect this to stay in a range. Wells Wilder will say that you use range trading strategies when the ADX is below 20, and trend trading strategies when the ADX is above 20. So if I definitely probably should have been paying closer attention to this as we're coming down to test horizontal support. If the ADX was crossing 20 and the DIs were really diverging, well, that would really give me good reason to believe that this is ready to break down. But if it's just flat, then we should really expect that we are, best suited either just kind of staying away, but really we would be best suited not using a trend trading strategy, which absolutely my moving average crossover that I combine with some higher time frame confirmation is definitely a trend trading strategy. So that's something that it's a good learning experience. Every time you see an indicator that's right and you're wrong, now it gives you more trust for that indicator moving forward. And that's really what it's all about, is trusting the tools that you're using, trusting the indicators that you're using more than yourself. If you can do that, then you can probably become pretty good at executing a trading strategy. So this is what I mean by like the weekly ADX. It topped out. So now I'm kind of wanting to see, is there going to be a trend now in the other direction? while that cools off, or maybe are we going to be stuck in a range? So zooming into lower time frames can help with that. Let's take a look at the 3-day before zooming in. And again, seeing that come down, yeah, I definitely should have been paying closer attention to that. I would have probably taken a lot more profit at that test, seeing this come down and crossing 20. As it looks like, I think this is going to break down. The ADX is just now crossing 20 to the downside. That's a pretty strong indication that we're not going to break down. Specifically, I mean, the DIs are close, and also the plus DI crossed the negative DI, indicating, you know, bulls were starting to take over. Let's go on into the 4-hour. So this is very much suggesting kind of what the Wyckoff is, that we will be ranging for another couple days. Seeing it's one thing to be below 20, it's another to be angled down and moving down below 20. That's much different than if you're kind of turning up and still below 20, but either flat or turning up. This angled down and moving down suggests that you know, support is probably likely to be found in this range, and then resistance is probably also likely to be found again in this range of around 10,500. As long as the ADX is doing the same thing, or really at a low spot, then that is absolutely something to expect. So hopefully, if we do range, it will give us some nice confirmations for the Wyckoff pattern. Okay, might as well just take a look at the 12-hour. 12-hour broke through here and is now angled back up. That's interesting. So only one time frame showing a trend that started back in here, which I would kind of disregard this and definitely trust the daily and the 4-hour and also the 3-day. Back to this chart, the weekly. Oh, that's a 2-week. Huh. That ADX is actually looking pretty darn strong. Interesting. Very interesting. But the DIs are, the demand is still waning, so that's pretty important. Alrighty. So back to the 1 week. There has been a C-clamp on the Ichimoku cloud. Wanting to check that out. Remains. Interesting how we haven't even come back to test the Kijun. That is a signal of strength as far as I'm concerned. You would expect once you break down the Tenkan Sen that you would return to the Kijun. Didn't happen. And now the Kijun is still flattened out, as this hasn't really resolved itself just yet. This is still definitely a C-clamp as far as I'm concerned. I do use traditional settings. A lot of people like the double settings, and I have tried those for a while and just strongly prefer the traditional settings. And this C-clamp is definitely something that suggests we need to return to the mean. And sometimes this can be a pretty darn good target, where the Kumo twisted. That's all the way down at 6,000. I'm not ready to have that target just yet, but that is interesting, and there would be a lot of reasons outside of the Ichimoku cloud to have that sort of target. Being that we haven't tested the Kijun, I mean, it makes me wonder if that could provide a bounce. The Kijun bounce is often where corrections will find a bottom. So it'd be interesting. I certainly wouldn't think that would happen, being that we've been ranging for a while, and if we do break down 92 or so, that would confirm the descending triangle, and if we did find support in here, it would just kind of be a trap in terms of you confirm the descending triangle, and then if we immediately reverse, that would definitely be a pretty nasty trap. Okay, let's pull up the SAR real quick. That hasn't had any need to start accelerating, and is interesting how far above this trend line it is. I love seeing barrier breaks in line with SAR breaks. So if we did break above this, I still would be quite cautious due to the SAR being up here, potentially waiting as resistance. I would much prefer to see the SAR near the trend line, and if the trend line broke and the SAR broke, that'd give me quite a bit more confidence in what I'm seeing with that breakthrough. So what else should we look at on the weekly chart? I'll take a drink of water and look at chat, see if anybody has anything they would like to see. Xavier Gonzalez says Ichimoku Cloud is a very strong indicator. I usually do 6-hour time frame plus 10 EMA and EMA 20. Yeah, it definitely seems like that could be very powerful. When I start putting EMAs on with the cloud, it starts to get a little bit too noisy for me personally. I just kind of like to use the Tenkin and the Kijun as my EMAs in terms of if you get a bullish cross, that could be considered a buy signal. In general, that'd be telling you take profit from shorts. Potentially re-entering the cloud would be the buy signal, and then exiting the cloud would be the next buy signal, and then looking for these to recross to indicate that we're ready to move kind of bearish. And they do act a lot like EMAs in terms of support and resistance, and with the crossovers and on down the line. I really like the idea of kind of applying the rules of Consensio to the cloud, and Consensio uses 3 moving averages, and we can look at on the cloud like the Tenkin as the short-term moving average, the Kijun as the medium-term moving average, and the cloud as the long-term moving average. And this and you can apply the same kind of rules that Tyler used with Consensio to the cloud, and the cloud gives you a little bit more information in terms of illustrating this cloud. Thick cloud would indicate a lot of resistance, and seeing that instead of looking for the angle, you look for the Kumo twist, and then that shows really good areas of support. So yeah, big proponent of the Ichimoku cloud. Did you see the daily, Ramil Yu asked, did you see the daily chart screenshot on Twitter on daily MA crossing? Do you think it matters? Definitely. If there's moving averages crossing, I think it is important. I don't know what moving averages would be crossing. They'd have to be a much shorter time frame than I generally look at. But let's go ahead and just play around real quickly, because that would be something good to know. Okay, 1 second. Yeah, I guess we can just leave that there for now. So it looks like a potential bullish cross with the 9 and the 50 could be coming in. That would be kind of the first one that I would really be looking at. I guess probably the 9 and around the 30 may be crossing. What would I do for the 30? I think pink. Definitely we'll kind of keep an eye on somewhere between like the 28 and the 32. So yeah, I'm definitely glad that we pulled this up. So it does look like we have a potential sort of bullish cross coming in, but what's much more important to me is the angle of the moving average, specifically the longer term moving average. So we do kind of see that we're getting squeezed in between a bearish longer term moving average and a bullish shorter term. This is the 9 and this is the 32, and we notice that the 32 is rolled over, and that is suggesting that we're in a bear market, and then the crossover agrees with the short being below, and then that we're getting squeezed in between definitely is will happen when you're kind of going flat for a little bit. So seeing that this is a bearish rollover, that it's definitely trending significantly down, even with this action here, that flattened it out, but now we have moved it down again. So seeing that angle, that's much more important to me than a crossover. If we did get a cross with that angle, it would look like a trap to me, and I just wouldn't really expect that cross to occur with this angle moving down. And then it looks like we're trying to break above that on multiple occasions, but always closing below. And it looks like we've got 4 more minutes, so this looks like it highly probable to close below again. And then I think the 50 is very much agreeing. Let's take a look. Nope, 50 has flattened. So that is interesting. Yeah, this is just a very congested zone where there's a lot of fighting going on. That's for darn sure. Where the 28 is really looking, is a significant bearish indicator. The 9 is very bullish, and then the 50 is just kind of right in between. So a lot of indecision right now. That's for darn sure. So I'm not sure which moving averages are crossing. Maybe you responded, but that I'm glad that we took that up. Took a look at that. Peter Brandt says the indecision in daily and weekly will be resolved by monthly time frame. Interesting. I am seeing some very bearish monthly candles, but it could be, considered like a bull pennant, depending on which way this breaks. It could be either way right now. A descending triangle on lower time frames or a bull pennant on higher time frames. If it breaks the upside, I would say it's the bull pennant. If it breaks the downside, I would say it's a descending triangle. And I am inclined to think it's breaking down due to what we looked at on some lower time frames. And I'm also just, these are ugly candles. These are ugly with lower high, lower high, lower high, lower high, reversal candle, reversal candle. The reversal candles haven't confirmed yet, so you definitely have to wait for that. And let's go ahead and take a look at some Henkin Ashi candles while we're at it. That is definitely starting to see that this is a potential reversal candle, but we're very early on. I'm fairly new. I'm pretty darn new to Henkin Ashi candles, and so take what I say with a grain of salt, but I don't think these would be considered reversal candles because of the open, basically these flat bottoms. That suggests a strong trend. When you have flat bottoms, you're in a strong trend. Flat tops, strong trend. And then when you get a doji, that's the reversal candle. And combined with a color flip for sure. So just kind of looking back here a little bit, and so this, the candle patterns don't work the same on Henkin Ashi candles as far as I understand. Like a shooting star is irrelevant on HA candles as far as I understand. What you really want to see is a wick on the bottom and some sort of doji showing that the trend is really now becoming exhausted. So that is definitely interesting. I don't think there's much to look at on the, let's just look at HA candles on the weekly real quick. So definitely reversal candles, but would you say that they're reversal candles after, selling off from 14,000 down to 9,000 and now they're reversal to the upside? Or would you say that, we got some wicks, like strong trend, okay, some wicks, now looking for a color flip, okay, we got the color flip. This could be interpreted in a lot of ways, I think. So something to pay attention to. Yeah, definitely something to pay attention to. So it looks like we did just get the close. Might as well go ahead and see exactly how that happened. not really a whole lot to say. I guess closing above, what was the close? 10,402. Closing above 10,400 could be, it's better than closing below it. Could be suggesting that 10,400 is, maybe won't hold as resistance. So with that weekly close above, I wouldn't really read into that very much at all. Yeah, there isn't a whole lot to say just based off of the candles. So I don't think there is anything else I want to look at on Bitcoin. We can go ahead and look at Ethereum unless I see a good question. Fib says 38.2 holding as resistance on monthly. I wonder if I would be able to draw it the same as him. I would basically look at, I think, something along these lines. Nope. I think this is where I really learned something, was that he would start it after the breakout, somewhere along those lines. Interesting. So yeah, it does look to me like we're peaking above, but we haven't closed above yet. We still have a long time to go. So I'm wondering if he is drawing it a little bit differently with the 0.382 above the price, or not. Let's see. Yeah, that's best that I can get it in on the monthly from what I can tell. So yeah, thanks for the input. We'll definitely keep an eye out on that, and definitely check out Fibbo Swanee. He has a podcast on YouTube. Support and Resistance is the channel, and he is on Twitter as well. Definitely one of my most respected traders for Fibonacci's and Elliott waves. So definitely check him out. And okay, I think it's time to move on. BTC Golden Cross on 4-hour happened. What do you think about that? Talked about that at the top of the show. Based on how flat they are, it really, we need to see a break out, basically above. We just need to see a breakout of this range before it really means anything, and I'll just pull that back up very quickly. If we get a break above 10,600, very significant. Those moving averages should start to diverge. If we break down 10,300, they should cross right back over. So I'm out of my positions. I'm definitely not longing the crossover, but it is something that is quite significant. Okay, let's see if we can get a clean chart. All right, 1 week. So notice that we haven't been able to close above the 4 EMA ever since this candle basically just took it all out. And a close above that 4 EMA definitely would be significant and would suggest that finally we're ready for a some sort of bounce, some sort of move back up into I would say this guy. So continuing having a green candle that still resisted this is doesn't really make me think that we should break through it this week. I mean, definitely take that for what it's worth. It does look like a potential for a tweezer bottom. This is a little bit lower. So that being said, kind of getting a similar pivot point as we're seeing on Bitcoin, but just at every step of the way, this thing has looked significantly weaker. So I wonder, I bet the ADX is showing us a trend here, and interesting. Very interesting. So ADX is moving down hard, and wow, the DIs haven't even crossed. Wow. This became a bear market for me right in here. All the moving averages crossed over, but the ADX still had was in bullish territory with the ADX above 20 and the plus DI above the negative DI. So now we are really converging and really flattening out with this thing coming down. So that really makes it look like we might be in for a significant, sort of ranging market out of Ethereum. Let's see what the lower time frames say about that. Interesting. So we see that, like I said, it's much different than when you're moving down. This is really telling you that that you should expect a range, specifically with these DIs so close to each other. Now we're moving up and threatening to cross zero. It might have trouble doing it with these DIs being so close together. It's like nobody's really, it's just nobody's really winning this fight right here. Nobody's really interested in either direction. And the ADX, for it to cross, we would really want to see these start to diverge. So being below 20 with those close definitely suggests that we could be trapped in a range for a little while. Wonder what the daily has to say. And it has rolled over with DIs starting to converge. Looks like it kind of maybe rolled over with a bit of a higher high. Yeah. So that will be interesting. Let's see what the range would look like. And the 4 hours telling us basically all time frames are really showing that this thing is wanting to just go sideways. Okay. So as it looks like it's threatening to break through 180, 182 is really the resistance. Yeah, 182. There's good reason to believe that it won't happen, because the ADX are strongly indicating that we're in a range, and if that's the case, I would expect this to be the range. And depending on how long those things, the DIs stay close to each other, and how long the ADX has trouble getting above 20, you can just kind of, this would be what to expect as long as the ADX is looking that way. And this is where, like I said, where Wells Wilder will look for range trading strategies opposed to trend trading strategies. And if you're using trend trading strategies in a range, you're just going to get whipped in and out, in and out, in and out, because buy signals will come after you get a little move up. This may cause a SAR breakthrough, it may cause a moving average crossover or whatever, but then as soon as you get to the top of that range, it just comes back and whipsaws you in and out, in and out. So if you can use the ADX to identify when we are in a ranging market opposed to a trending market, then you can start to potentially just kind of sell resistance and buy support. And I did sell this guy yesterday. I talked about it on Tone's show, this sharp spike up and into an area that I had pegged as a significant area of resistance. That was really a good selling opportunity as far as I was concerned. I'm kind of disappointed not to see the reaction downward. And let's go ahead and throw some fibs on there to see if maybe that's where it found support. And sure enough, I've often seen Fiboswani say that fibs rock, and this is and I can see why. The more that I've seen him use it, the more I've learned about it, and you see how significant these lines have been, where let's see here. We have basically, right here was where we kind of topped. So maybe after this candle, you can draw it in, and maybe it takes you another candle to realize, or whatever the case may be. But if you were able to draw these in after this guy, you see how the 0.382 is where we find support. 0.236 is where we have failed to close below. So that's definitely, quite bullish in terms of we are not retracing very far at all, and it seems like 0.382 could be a significant area of support. So keep an eye out on these numbers that you see here. Breaking down 0.382 would definitely make me think that we're going to come back to the bottom of this range, all the way back, retrace fully, due to the ADXs pointing that way themselves, saying that we're stuck in a range, we're not going anywhere. So if we are able to break that down, that seems like a pretty good target to have, and definitely an area where I would be trimming again. I did trim on this one. I had a order on the books at 166, so I was able to catch that and take some profit, and then go ahead and re-enter back up here at like around here. So that would be the plan again moving forward. Definitely trim, and if it comes back and everything else is still looking good, like this sharp spike up and into resistance was something that it just doesn't. It's a bear market for Ethereum based on the moving average crossovers, and when you get a sharp spike in a bear market, it's something that I view as a good opportunity to sell the bounce. So that is something that I want to zoom in on a little bit, because it looks like there's probably a trend line that's pretty darn significant that may be getting kind of tested. So let's zoom this in and see what that 15 minutes looking like. We may need a higher liquidity exchange, but even with this kind of low liquidity, we see, let's get a better chart up. How about Binance? Okay, so I'm just going to use the bottom of this guy, and yeah, that fits real nice. So very interesting how this basically perfectly found support there, maybe slightly above. Nope, if we tighten that up a little bit, that really nice area of support. Found support here again. Tried breaking it down just in the last 15 minutes following the weekly close. That's something to be paying close attention to, is the reaction that happens. There's a lot of people out there waiting for that weekly close and to potentially signal some sort of entry. I certainly didn't see much that could have been signaled based on this week. So maybe there won't be a whole lot of volatility immediately following, but definitely want to see, how the market is reacting to the weekly close. Is it reacting to the upside or to the downside? So we did try to break this down. We even did create a slightly lower low. It looks like, what's the low of this? 179.36, 179.43. So we did create a slightly lower low, and we looks like maybe made a slightly lower high. We could just make another higher low, and then this would be, like a higher high and then a higher low and then a higher high. But as of right now, it looks to me like the resistance is ever so slightly creeping down, and support is ever so slightly giving away. So even though this is just a 15-minute chart, when I see a trend line this clean, I will absolutely be paying attention to what happens. And if we do break down that trend line, I would think that we are ready to go ahead and maybe revisit the bottom of this range and break down that 0.382 level. So I'll absolutely be watching this closely moving forward. And this also looks like a bit of a Wyckoff pattern. If you have the preliminary supply, buying climax, automatic reaction, secondary test doesn't quite get up there, lower high, kind of turning this into resistance. Nope, it sure didn't. So yeah, we'll watch for this to potentially become resistance right here at 181. Seems to be a very important number. If we break that down, the trend line would likely follow. Let's take a look at the RSI to see if maybe it could be a leading indicator for us. And it has not broken down yet. Whoa, it just made a pretty decent move right there in front of our eyes. But it's still fitting in the same pattern, so I'll definitely watch for this to break down this line, as it looks like the price is kind of wanting to do that. But if this holds, I mean, resistance would be pretty futile after that, I would think. If we are able to find support here, it could just shoot right through. And that's something that I am not wanting to see, but I do feel like there is plenty of resistance above if that does happen. So there's my first area of resistance. Second area of resistance would be this 200 period exponential moving average on the 4-hour chart, which has been very significant. Last time we tested it, it was a great selling opportunity. Price really tried to break through, was unable to. Was great support through the bull run. And let's see if we got any more. And then during the bear market, I mean, this has just been a great area. This is good to see. You know, it tried breaking through, but just wasn't able to. Even when it tried, it didn't get the moving average cross. Look how close that got. Incredible, absolutely incredible. And then it dumps. But you see how that 200 period moving average on the 4-hour chart has been very significant. Basically throughout the last few years and maybe even longer than that. So if we do break through here, I would view it as nothing more than a selling opportunity. 190 is where where that is currently coming in, and we can see that there would just be even more horizontals after that. So a lot of resistance above that. If this did get above 200, now things have really changed. But from here up to 200, it's just resistance, resistance, resistance. So I'm really hoping that we break down from here, being that I just entered a pretty significant position right around this price range. If we can break down from here and I can cover some more down here at support, now I'm really going to be feeling like a happy camper. If we run up from here, I'm going to be underwater, and I'm at least on this entry. And even if I'm up on the overall position, if I'm underwater on my most recent entry, I'm not really in love with going ahead and adding to that. So I would view this as a great selling opportunity, but I've got enough exposure that I probably wouldn't be interested in that. And then if we do get above that, I would look for hopefully that it was just a fake out and led to a sharp reaction to the downside. So this does kind of look a bit like a bull flag to me, so that's something that I'll certainly pay attention to if this does break to the upside. Maybe say that it's a pennant and something like that would be interesting. If we broke this to the upside, not only would there be resistance from horizontal, but there would also potentially be some selling pressure from people who are trading this pattern. If that does confirm, that would change quite a bit. I mean, if we, basically confirm this bull flag, I mean, I said it changed quite a bit. It really wouldn't, because we're right up here in my real sell zone. If we were able to then consolidate bullish high and tight, kind of like this did, and break through again, now breaking through 200 would be a whole game changer. That breaking through there and staying there for an amount of time would probably cause these to cross over bullish, and that would be definitely a big game changer. Let's go ahead and take a look at the daily moving averages. So we see that not only would the 200 period moving average on the 4-hour chart be waiting for resistance, but the 50-day would be waiting right there too. And if we did get above 200, you would have that last area to hope for, but I probably wouldn't be able to hold through based on the moving average, unless it was just like a sharp spike and wick, because if we get up in here, I'd be thinking those moving averages are ready to cross. And we can see that the 50-day has been a very similar sort of area of support and resistance as the 200 on the 4-hour. Okay, let's see here. All right, I will want to take a look at ETH against BTC, and then we'll probably call it a day. And it would be neat if we could see something happen with this trend line before logging off. It would be cool if something happened here. Let's go ahead and take another look at the RSI, because it sure looks like this market's ready to make a move. And the ADX is saying that the move is most likely just to be back down to 168 and then back up to 180, unless we are really seeing some divergence on a move back down here with the DIs. So RSI hasn't done anything. DIs are starting to diverge with the ADX coming up. So like I said earlier, what I love to see is, maybe I mentioned the SAR, but also what I want to see is, if it looks like a boundary line is getting ready to break, we want to see the ADX crossing 20 as a strong confirmation that the market is ready to trend after being in this sideways range. So if this looks like it's breaking down, which it kind of does, and this is coming up to cross 20, that would provide, some pretty important confirmation that a breakdown is ready. And on the other hand, when it looks like we're ready to break through this area, keeping an eye on that. And what's different here is the demand decreasing, but also supply. I mean, people are just getting really uninterested, and that uninterest will probably change if this line breaks. So ETH BTC, it did get a little rally. We're going to go to a different chart. Interesting seeing that. Okay, let's just start with the weekly. That is a hammer candle. What's the ADX doing? ADX is strong. This is a point where it's petered out before, but I wouldn't expect that to be the case here, since we just broke down such a major, massive area of support. This petered out here when we were kind of in this pattern, in that descending triangle. When it really trended, it got much above that. So this is definitely looking strong. There aren't really many buyers showing up. Sellers may be slightly becoming disinterested. RSI is wrecked all the way down here, and look at how that led to this divergence last time. You get the spike in the ADX, and then you get the higher low in the lower low in the price, higher low in the RSI. So we'll be watching for a divergence anytime RSI gets to extreme. Watch for a divergence. Seeing that hammer candle makes me want to look at the HA candles to see what they're saying. This is saying no signs of stopping, no signs of slowing down. Look at these flat tops. I used to rock a flat top when I was young. That was pretty sweet. But this is the hammer candle on the normal candles. That suggests that maybe this is a spot where trend is becoming exhausted and it's time to turn around. Not seeing anything like that in the HA candles, and I definitely have grown to kind of trust these a little bit more than a reversal candle. Specifically, it's like a red candle that's a hammer, so that doesn't really tell us a whole lot. So seeing that we really don't have any dojis, we don't have any wicks on top, like that's definitely showing that we are in strong trend territory, which is what the ADX is showing. I wonder what the TI is on. Yep. I really don't pay attention to, what is it, the setup phase? Yeah, I don't pay attention to the setup phase. I really just care about the countdown. Nope, I think I got that backwards. Oh well. I don't care about the sequential combos. They don't do much for me. And even the nines, when I see a 9, I look at the ADX to see, well, is the ADX exhausted? Because what I've noticed is that often on the strongest trends, you'll get 3 9s in a row on the weekly specifically. 3 weekly 9s is what I look for. When that happens, it's really a strong sign of exhaustion. When I see 1 9, I look for the ADX to see, does it say that we are exhausted? So, and basically every entry this is provided, it has quickly turned into profit. The 2 below the 1, 2 below the 1, 3 below the 2, 3 below the 2. So will be interesting to see if this takes out lows. Definitely not seeing signs of exhaustion on the weekly. Let's go ahead and look at the daily. And look at all those 9s in a row. 3 9s in a row on the daily is much different than on the weekly. So notice reversal candle, and then we do kind of get a little pop. And would be interesting to see if the 2 gets above the 1. I guess, did this just open? This would have just opened. Oh, it's HA candles, so those open kind of weird based on the moving average, based on the last candle. So the 2 did get above the 1 on normal candles. Interesting. Want to look at the ADX. ADX again is nowhere near a point of exhaustion, but we do see it starting to kind of topple, and the DIs are starting to come together. Interesting that demand just kind of turned down. I wonder if we have a divergence on the RSI. We do. Higher low. Lower low. Okay, so definitely getting a divergence on that RSI. That's absolutely something to pay attention to. Will make me think that, I mean, I'm still pretty darn convinced that any bounce is a selling opportunity. So I noticed recently that the 100 just isn't quite fast enough for this ticker here. Got to use the 100. Ooh, very nice. Very nice. And I noticed this kind of in a previous show that the 200 just really wasn't getting tested. This thing's just so weak that the bounces are toppling over at the 100. And notice how precisely, I mean, every time. Bam, 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 bam. And look at how just couldn't even close above. I guess we got 1, maybe 2 closes above, but reversal candle. I mean, just this 100 on ETH BTC is pretty exciting. I mean, Very, very interesting. So what are we looking at now? Just perfect. I mean, are you kidding me? Just perfect. Resistance. Perfect. A wick above, close below. Hanging man. Now we are turning over from that. So like I said, I have been viewing bounces here as selling opportunities, and I did sell 0.74 was where I thought it was going to, that's where my order was filled, mainly because that's where I was kind of looking at this trend line. Yeah, basically I just set an order and was definitely filled, and now again we'll be very interested to see what happens. It looks like it may be starting to make a move. I just absolutely love seeing us trend lines and moving averages. Absolutely just love when they line up because you got resistance from the trend line, and if that fails, then maybe the moving average is above, or if you have them right on the same area, even better. So really liking this 100 EMA on ETH BTC, liking this bear channel. Definitely want to see that continue, and I have no reason to believe that it won't. So that's why we profit take, we trim when positions are moving in our favor, and then that allows us to re-enter if we get a really nice setup. And if we don't, then that means the rest of our position is probably moving in our favor, so we're happy campers either way. And interesting to see that this ADX has rolled up. Demand is decreasing, and I think we did see, did we see a 9? Yeah, man, what a selling opportunity. Do whatever you want with your own money. It's your decision. I'm just talking out loud, but that's sure a pretty sweet setup. And not much has changed. We're basically at the same price. So you get the 9, and you get resistance from the moving average, and resistance from the trend line. Pretty sweet action. Wonder what the HA candles are telling us. Reversal candle here. Watch for a color flip is what I would want to see next. Yeah, so it certainly 9 here at the bottom, 9 here, and that's like one of the best things ever is when you have a channel where you're getting 9s at the bottom and 9s at the top. That's like just one of the best things that I can picture in my mind. That's like just an ideal market. So we don't know that this is the top at all, and we could definitely blast right through, no problem, and it could just in the matter of an instant go like this, right? So definitely be very cautious and careful with what you are doing, but in terms of risk reward, this seems pretty darn sweet. What I would do is use the moving average crossover as a way to exit, and would kind of estimate risk based on somewhere around here. If we do get above that, like potentially this is where we would be about expecting to exit if we do get across. So then I would be using that to estimate risk, and then looking at potential reward, and the risk reward here definitely does look pretty sweet. I do want to take a look at the weekly SAR, because that's another really powerful tool for me for when the markets are really moving, when they are ready to get exhausted. The SAR on the weekly is something to definitely pay close attention to. As long as that stays intact, I'm definitely feeling pretty good. We did break the daily SAR, so that'll be interesting. But for me right now, I am most interested in the channel as it is drawn, as well as the 50 and 200 moving 50 and 100 moving average on the 4-hour chart. We'll be watching for confirmation of these reversal candles with a break below 0.172, and just want to take a quick peek at ETH USD to see what it is doing. And it looks like maybe it did break down that. Interesting. This 100 on the 15-minute. Very interesting. This is ETH USD. Perhaps I should pay more attention to that 100 moving average. Okay, just real quickly, see what we're looking at. Is this what we're looking at? I think so. I think maybe before I had... oh, this is a different exchange, so it's not going to be the same, but here's how I would want to have it. It's definitely not as clean as that other exchange. I'm going to pull up the other exchange. Sorry about this real quick. Binance. There we go. Okay, glad that we did, because definitely a much cleaner picture that we're seeing here. And it hasn't broken down for the RSI. RSI hasn't. ADX hasn't crossed 20, so nothing doing there. And what I would definitely want to keep an eye on is the 9 EMA crossing the 50 as further confirmation. If that fails to happen, if that doesn't cross, then it would sure seem like this trend line held and that we should probably go ahead and take out these local highs and probably go right to around 190 to 200. All right, that is plenty for today, coming in pretty close to my usual 90 minutes. Thank you guys very much for tuning in, and on this Sunday evening, I always appreciate it, and thank everybody who watched all the way through another long episode. You guys are definitely the best. I really appreciate the kind words and the thumbs up and comments. If there's something that maybe was unclear that you'd like to know more about, I do my best to review comments, and if there are good questions, to either answer them on air or just type out a response. So I will be heading out to the hot springs. It is Sunday. Time to give our mothers a call to wish them a happy Sunday, let them know that we love them and that we're thinking about them. I just got a note that came up on my calendar, so I will be doing that and heading out to the hot springs for a nice relaxing evening. We'll be up early in the morning for Block TV Trader's Take with Joe Saz, so take a look at that. It's a very short, brief format. If you're interested, that'll be out in the morning, and did do a show earlier today with Tone where a lot of stuff was covered here, but Tone was able to provide his input. We actually had a couple areas where we were disagreeing, so that's always great when we can both kind of provide, logical reasons for why we're seeing things maybe a little bit different or approaching a little bit different. So thank you all. We will plan on catching up with you tomorrow.